All right, let's dive right in. We're starting today with a premise that's, frankly, pretty wild. Imagine playing a really high-stakes narrative adventure, sci-fi. But you, the player, you're a 6-month-old baby.
Yeah, and get this, the way you control things. It's not a controller, not really. It's your face. Specifically, closing your eyes or, blinking at just the right moment lets you control this world.
Oh.
A world that thinks you're completely powerless.
We are talking about Goodnight Universe, aren't we? The big follow-up from the folks who basically invented webcam-controlled narrative games.
Exactly. If you remember Before Your Eyes, the BAFTA winner, you know just how powerful and honestly how emotionally devastating that kind of mechanic can be.
Absolutely. So our mission today is pretty clear. We need to dig into the sources, developer notes, previews, what came out of the Tribeca Film Festival win, really unpack what Goodnight Universe is trying to do, what are these face-tracking mechanics, and maybe the big question, is it a genuine evolution, or does that core idea risk feeling, I don't know, a bit like a gimmick this time around?
It's all about that legacy, isn't it? This is from Nice Dream, the new studio, but it's founded by the same creative minds, Graham Parks and Oliver Lewin. And when your first game is something like Before Your Eyes, it got called a Twitch tearjerker because your actual blinks moved you through these painful memories. Well, that sets an incredibly high bar. Almost impossible to meet again, maybe.
Yeah, they weren't just making a game. It felt like they were extracting an emotional toll from something you couldn't even control.
Right. And that context, that history, makes the premise of Goodnight Universe feel even more ambitious. Because the core concept, it sounds like it's rooted in this really intimate family drama, but then layered with this huge sci-fi threat on top.
Okay, let's get right into those stakes then.
Yeah.
You play as Isaac, 6 months old. And the sources make it clear his first goal, the most basic one, is just emotional, right?
Yeah.
He wants love, acceptance from his parents, totally universal.
Mm-hmm. But that simple need gets complicated fast. Because Isaac, he's developing these mysterious, pretty powerful psychic abilities. And, like any good sci-fi thriller, these kinds of powers, they attract the wrong kind of attention. The sources mention a secretive tech corporation that wants his abilities.
Ah, okay. So that puts the family and Isaac's need for just basic love and safety, it puts it all in real danger. Existential jeopardy, even.
Exactly. That tension is key, isn't it? Total vulnerability. He's a baby combined with this immense growing power.
That's got to be tricky to balance. You've got the first-person narrative adventure feel, but also it sounds like a genuine thriller atmosphere.
And the developers, they've been pretty open about that pressure. Graham Parks talked about their sophomore album anxiety.
Right.
Before Your Eyes was known for tragedy, for making people cry. They know they can't just promise the same thing again. They still want to tell these concise, emotional stories. But it feels like they're aiming for a different tone here, maybe something more unsettling, given the whole corporate spying angle.
Yeah, that makes sense. They have to show that these unique mechanics, this face tracking stuff, can actually support a totally different kind of story.
And you can see that ambition in the production values they're putting behind it.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, the studio, Nice Dream, they're based in LA, and it looks like they've really used that proximity to Hollywood. They've got some serious acting talent involved.
But who?
Lewis Pullman, you'd know him from Top Gun. Yep. Maverick, he's voicing Isaac, which is interesting, right? For a baby character. Suggests maybe we hear his internal thoughts.
Yeah, good point.
And plus, they've got actors from shows like Veep, Barry, The Daily Show.
Yeah.
Really strong comedic and dramatic actors.
Okay, so they're not messing around. Getting that caliber of talent suggests the narrative, the delivery is absolutely crucial to them. They're betting big on the story.
For sure. And it's not just some far-off concept either. The logistics look solid. Release date is set. November 11th, 2025. And it's coming out everywhere. PC on Steam, PS5, Xbox Series X and S, Nintendo Switch, even the upcoming Switch 2.
Wow, okay. And it already won an award at the Tribeca Film Festival this year, right? For the game category.
It did, yeah. Which suggests that the demo they showed, whatever state it was in, really connected with critics, made a strong impression.
Which brings us right back to the heart of this deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
The tech.
Yeah.
The way you actually play. They're calling it cameras, controller mode, or face tracking. It's building on what they did before, but more.
Exactly. It's an expansion, an evolution of that single mechanic they started with.
And this is where it gets really interesting, I think. Because it feels like a fundamental shift in philosophy compared to Before Your Eyes. In that game, your blink was involuntary, wasn't it? It meant loss, losing control, time slipping away, being forced through this tragic story.
Yeah.
So what does blinking do in Goodnight Universe?
It's the complete opposite, essentially. Here, blinking seems to be deliberate. It's framed as an act of empowerment. They want the player to choose to use their power. The sources give examples like blinking at a light switch to turn it off, or blinking at balloons to pop them. Simple stuff, maybe. But the idea is to make you feel like this fledgling, crawling psychic.
That's a massive creative risk, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Taking something involuntary like blinking and making it a conscious action and input, that totally changes how you relate to the mechanic. If I have to, like, deliberately strain to blink just right to pop a balloon, does that feel magical?
No.
Or does it just become tedious? Especially if the camera tech isn't perfect every time.
That is absolutely the tightrope they're walking. But the mechanic that seems to be getting the most praise from the demo, the one that really feels like a successor, it involves closing your eyes, completely closing them.
Okay. How does that work?
So when Isaac's eyes are open, as the player, you hear the external world, maybe his dad reading him some boring bedtime story, just going through the motions.
Standard baby stuff.
Right. If you, the player, physically close your eyes, and the webcam sees that you're holding them closed,
Then what?
you instantly switch audio tracks. You drop out of the external world and into the father's internal monologue, his real thoughts.
Whoa.
Yeah. This is where you hear about the family's actual struggles. The dad's doubts about being a father, maybe his frustration with his job, hidden tensions with Isaac's mom.
Yeah.
All that inner stuff.
Okay, that's genius, seriously. It uses the player's physical action shutting out the world to access a secret internal world. It mirrors that feeling of disconnect perfectly. Wow, that feels essential, not gimmicky, that uses the camera for deep narrative purpose.
It really does. It feels like the clearest evolution of the emotional core from the first game. But we do have to mention it's not just the camera this time. They've also added controls using other facial expressions, frowning, smiling, but also pretty standard mouse interactions.
Mouse clicks.
Yeah, clicking and dragging. Apparently for some early tasks they call chores, like putting away dishes.
Wait, hang on. Chores. I'm playing as a powerful psychic baby, and my first job is tidying up using a mouse. That feels weirdly counter to the whole empowerment idea they're aiming for.
And that is exactly the point that some of the early critical reactions latched onto. Before we get fully into that critique, though, just worth noting, this isn't a kid's game despite the baby protagonist. The ESRB rating mentions drug reference, fantasy violence, language, mild suggestive themes.
Right, definitely mature narrative adventure then. Okay, so let's pivot to that early analysis. This is crucial. We've got the philosophical shift. Before your eyes was involuntary disempowerment, tragedy. Goodnight Universe is aiming for deliberate empowerment, maybe more of a thriller. Based on the previews, does it actually work? Does it land?
Technically, it seems like it, yeah. The sources agree the eye-closing mechanic, the one we just talked about, it's praised, called a clever way of portraying the disconnect between a character's inner and outer world.
Okay.
And people seem impressed by the basic magic of blinking to affect the environment. The tech itself, the face tracking engine, seems pretty solid.
But there's a but, isn't there?
There is. The but comes from the fact that they gave the player more control overall. By adding the mouse clicks, by having maybe a more straightforward sci-fi plot structure, that's where the concern comes in. Some people who played the demo felt the webcam control started to risk feeling gimmicky by the end, even in a short demo.
Gimmicky?
Yeah.
Why? Because the actions weren't always meaningful.
Kinda, yeah. It's about the stakes. In the first game, every single blink felt catastrophic because it meant losing time, losing a piece of this dying man's life story. Huge weight. Here, if you're using these cool new psychic powers activated by your face, but you're using them for what the previews called underwhelming tasks, like tidying a room.
Then the weight just isn't there.
Exactly. The psychic empowerment mechanic is being used for mundane chores. It kind of deflates that feeling of being a fledgling, crawling psychic.
Yeah, I can see that. If I'm using reality-bending powers to put away dishes, it suddenly feels less like an essential story mechanic and more like just a novelty input method, a trick.
Precisely. By bringing in traditional controls and maybe broadening the scope of what the camera input does, they risk losing that intense, poignant focus the first game had. That purity of design, like singular connection between mechanic and emotion, was arguably the key to Before Your Eyes' success. The worry is that this added complexity, while maybe allowing for a bigger story, makes the camera feel less like the absolute emotional core and more like an optional feature, something you could almost imagine turning off.
Okay, so that really frames the central question for you, the listener, thinking about this game. We're left with this really interesting conflict, right? is this added complexity, this bigger story, psychic baby versus corporation. Is it a successful evolution? Does it prove the face tracking concept can work beyond pure tragedy?
Or does bringing in mouse clicks and maybe less impactful uses for the powers, does that dilute the magic? Does it make the core innovation feel less special, less essential, more like a cool trick than a fundamental way to tell a story? That's the incredibly fine line Nice Dream has to walk when the full game releases. Nailing that balance is everything.
So you should have a pretty clear picture now. The high concept plot, the impressive voice cast, the release details, and crucially, the specific genius of that eye-closing mechanic, set against the potential risk of the blinking for empowerment, feeling a bit underwhelming at times.
The stakes feel really high, both for Isaac in the story and kind of for the developers in terms of game design philosophy. They're trying to push tech boundaries to tell a deeply human story.
And that leads us perfectly into our final thought for you to chew on. Think about the emotional experience of playing from the perspective of someone, a baby, who is completely physically reliant on others for everything, survival even. Yet at the same time, this character holds immense reality-altering power. How does that fundamental clash, total dependence versus almost total power? How might that drive the choices you'll have to make?
That contrast, that dichotomy, that feels like it has to be the emotional engine that justifies the unique way you interact with this world. It has to make the face tracking feel necessary.